Okay, just want to make sure that you can actually hear me fine because like my earphones are screwing up. So like thumbs up if you can understand me. Awesome. Okay, so like I'm not going to say that beauty pageants and beauty competitions are good or bad because that's not super relevant here. What I think the problem is the way that they're run and the way that they're judged. And so I think, and there's a number of reasons as to why the judging of beauty pageants and beauty competitions just completely sucks right now. Right? Firstly, you have personal or actual people judging them, which is problematic because you have, their own personal ideas, their own personal values, their own things that they themselves think are attractive and not. And I get that they're supposed to be like super not biased and they're supposed to be super impartial, but like it doesn't actually happen like that because the fact is that beauty in this instance is supposed to be super subjective, and so how can you have a subjective person objectively judging something, which just I don't see how that works. And so what artificial intelligence in this instance is going to fix is, one, it's going to fix the fact that you can't have an impartial person judging beauty because it's so apparently subjective. But it also means that a lot of the harms that come from beauty pageants and beauty competitions are mitigated. And these are things like, the harmful ideologies and the harmful messages that it sends. So things like, the fact that to be super attractive, you have to be all dolled up, you have to pretty much be caked in makeup, you have to have, an expensive dress with the most amount of sequins, the most amount of flair. Whereas with artificial intelligence, because it can't actually measure those things, it creates this more natural kind of beauty. And so it kind of removes the idea that, to be great, you have to be super, super fake, I guess. And the reason it does that is because it measures, actual facial features. And while that doesn't sound like, the best possible thing, I feel like it's a much better alternative to what is currently happening. And, this is something I'll get more on later, but I definitely think that, while this isn't the perfect solution to beauty pageants, I think it's better than what we currently have. But anyway, you can have the microphone now, and over to you.
Oh, cool. Thanks for inviting me on today. This should be marginally less inflammatory than most of my debates, but I suppose we'll have to see where things go as time goes on. First of all, I want to say I usually try to wear an appropriate shirt, so I wore one with a hot chick with large breasts riding a dragon. As you can see, the breasts are right there. It's wildly unrealistic. There's no bra strap. There's nothing holding these shells up. They would have fallen down quickly. But that's neither here nor there. So my question is, if we were to have artificial intelligence judge beauty, now you talked a lot about face, specifically in makeup and glitter and whatnot. So my two questions to you are, what metrics do you think artificial intelligence should judge women on, if we're assuming it's women in the beauty contest? And secondly, would it only be face? Would it be boobs? Would it be butt? Would it be hair? Like, how would this practically play out in real time, is my question.
I think it really depends on the type of, filtering you want to put onto this. And so, like, it's not like we're using artificial intelligence to judge beauty itself. We're just using it to judge beauty competitions. I don't think that we should use computer and, machinery and those sorts of things to judge what we think is beautiful. I think just in a competition environment, it should be judged by artificial intelligence. Now, in terms of, what kind of metrics should we use to judge these things? I can't remember the name of the actual company. I'll see if I can get it up. That this actually has been done before. It happened twice last year. It was done by a company called beauty.ai. And so what they did, they had a whole database of images, and they, the AI, the algorithms the AI used were based on, I think, 4 things. I have it written down somewhere. It was something like face symmetry, things like blemishes, acne, those kinds of things. Things like wrinkles and other facial features, as well as just general, like, your actual age versus your perceived age. And I think that's a good place to start, just because obviously AI is able to be, is very adaptable. And so we can't really just plug it in and say, look, this is everything. And we can't just start very big. We have to take small steps. And I think at the moment, what we've got and what this company is doing is very well. As to how it's going to play out in the real world, I think we should keep it to just a phase for now until we understand, until we realize the best way possible to move forward. And while I get that, there are so many flaws in this, like it's not the most perfect system, I feel like we should really focus on, making it less flawed, and then, completely taking away the judgment of beauty in competitions by people. Like I said, I definitely don't think that actual beauty should be judged, because, I stand by the whole beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but I don't think that that's a very good ideology to have when you're judging beauty, for the purpose of a competition, and, there are prizes. I think in the real world, AI should not be used for this, but like I said, in a competition environment, I think definitely we should have the most impartial person or impartial entity possible, which in this instance is AI. So back to you.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the beauty.ai. You're right, they have done this in the past. There was a contest where 60,000 people sent pictures in, even though some websites report 600,000. I think that's wrong. 60,000 people sent their pictures in, according to those metrics that you mentioned, and the machine picked 44 winners. Now, of the 44 winners, 36 were white, and the remaining 8, I think 5 of them were Asian, and 2 of them were Indian. So based off of this objective technology, no black women were chosen, no black men were chosen, and in fact, social justice warriors lost their minds over this. I'm going to post the link to the winners of that contest right here in the comments, if I can figure out how. There we go. And so what ended up happening was, based on programmed metrics of what makes a beautiful face, because it was particularly of the face, which is why I asked you that question earlier, they chose races of overwhelmingly certain races as being more beautiful objectively than others. So if we're going to go with what artificial intelligence thinks, because we know that there are certain features that the human face finds attractive even when we're babies. I have a degree in psychology. I remember the class very clearly. There are certain, it's about proportion and symmetry. So artificial intelligence overwhelmingly favors certain races in terms of proportion and symmetry. So if that's how it continues, I don't think any people of other races, like Aboriginals, for example, would ever be chosen. Now you can say, and I would actually agree with this, that fair is fair, and to the winner go the spoils, to whoever has the most merit and the most beauty. But most of the world operates on this everything has to have equal outcomes paradigm. So I think that even if, I don't think they're going to run this project again, because it leads to the real question here, which is, how can you program something without the beliefs of the programmer going into the machine? How can you have a program, an artificial intelligence program, that makes up its own mind about beauty, independent of its programmers?
Okay, I'm really glad that you tried to do that, because I was reading so many articles about it this morning, right? The reason why it picked so many more white people rather than people of color is because the databases that the people inputted into the program before they sent the images, 80% of them, about 80% of them were actually white. So of course, when you put in 80% of however many images they put in to the database that this AI system is going to reference, of course they're going to pick most of them being white, because what happens is this AI system picks up patterns. And if you have mostly one pattern, then obviously the AI is going to mostly recognize that pattern as being, I guess you could say, the most prominent or the most prolific. The best way to eliminate that is to actually have equal. Now, and this is how you actually fix that problem. It was not that the AI was like, no, white people are so much better than black people. It was more that this is what I've seen more of. So it's going to be harder for me to recognize that the other, I guess you could say, other images are, of an equal standard. And so the way to fix that is to have an equal number of, people of a white background or people of color or people from, like an Asian background, because that way, the patterns are all recognized equally, which means that they all have the same level of opportunity for the AI to recognize them as a certain as a certain score, because that's what happens. Is it scores them. It doesn't just say, oh well, look, I think this is better. It scores them based on the 4 mechanisms that it has. And so obviously when you have, let's just say they had 100 people, 100 images in the database. If you've got 80% of those, 80 of the 100 images are of white people, and only 20 of them are of a person of color, which obviously means that it's going to be hard for an AI system to recognize, the person of color as being on the same standard as a person from a white background. And the way that you would, input something like this without the bias of, whoever's doing the thinking, because that's what AI does. AI on face value does the thinking, whereas we really do it ourselves because we input all of the data and the AI just puts it all together. So the best way to remove this bias of whoever's operating the AI is to implement filters and to make sure that they can't actually have an imbalance of different people or people of different racial backgrounds, which is why the first one failed, because they didn't actually realize that what was going to happen was that the AI is going to recognize whatever the majority of images are is probably the dominant and most prolific, which means that it's not going to recognize anything else as being on the same level.
Well, I don't think that's how their methodology worked. I think the better argument that you could have made would have been the true statement that the participants were overwhelmingly white. And so of the 60,000, most were white. So I think that's probably why most of the winners were also white. I don't believe that the metrics, I don't believe they were just looking, the machine was just looking for what have we seen the most of. I mean, it was programmed with very specific metrics that it was looking for. Again, related to proportion and symmetry, which we have this kind of myth in our culture that beauty is a social construct, that everything is equally attractive. But studies overwhelmingly, in fact, conclusively, have demonstrated that even small infants and toddlers have a very fixed and biological preference for faces with specific proportions, such as the golden ratio between the teeth and all kinds of other stuff all over the body, the golden ratio. It's very interesting, actually. And symmetry is always seen as the most beautiful. Many athletes have very symmetrical musculature as well. So the beauty is kind of a byproduct of the function in a certain way. It's hard to be beautiful if you're really unhealthy, you're really out of shape. But, so yeah, I don't think that's how their methodology works. But let me ask you this. Let's do a thought experiment. So let's say they input an equal number of white, black, Asian, Jew, and Mexican, and whatever else exists. I think those are the main ones, but whatever else exists. They input an equal number of all those pictures in. If the machine still came back overwhelmingly one race, and I'm not even saying just white people, if it came back overwhelmingly black, overwhelmingly Jewish, overwhelmingly Mexican, at that point, would you still be saying that artificial intelligence should be the judge, or would you change your mind and go with something else? And the reason I'm asking is because I'm curious whether unequal results would make you change your mind about the objectivity of the scoring.
I think the problem here is that, we're too heavily focusing on the participants themselves and the number of participants. The reason why the AI had such a biased result was because the database that it used before it got the actual participants was so strictly skewed towards a non-person of color background. And so that's why, okay, obviously having more white people enter isn't going to help, but to start with, it was the fact that the database used was just so skewed towards white people. And an example of this was, I think it was Google who did it. Someone searched a website on Google with like all the filters for like buildings and backgrounds and like architecture kind of things, and they came up with a whole lot of images of dogs. The reason why is because the website that they used to filter had so many images of dogs. So as soon as you input something like that into a database, then the AI system recognizes that as being part of whatever it is you're trying to do, regardless of whether the participants or not are mostly people of color or mostly people of a white background or whatever. The minute that you have, a majority in the database, makes it hard for the AI to recognize anything other than that as being on an equal playing field. But anyway, to answer your question, if there was an equal number of input on both the database and the participants, and it was still overwhelmingly skewed towards one particular race, I think at that point we would kind of look at the AI, look at the data we're inputting, look at the reasoning why it did that, and then try and figure out whether or not it is legitimate or whether or not there was a fault somewhere. Because obviously there will be personal biases put onto the machinery, and so we have to try and work harder to make it as unbiased as possible. And I don't think I would change my mind if the results were a bit skewed, but the database and the entrants were equal, because that's a lot less biased than having mostly white people enter mostly white people in the database and then being like, well, the system is racist because it picked more white people, even though, 80% of the 60,000 people that entered were actually white. And so I don't understand, I definitely would not change my mind if the results were equal. But one thing I want to ask you is why do you think, people judging with their subjectivity is better than having an objective nature of AI? Like, why should we have people judging instead of computers? Because I think that makes it even worse for people entering in beauty contests.
That's a good question, and I'll answer it in one moment. I want to point out, before I get to that the debate you proposed is where beauty contests exist, they should be judged by artificial intelligence. But what you just mentioned a second ago is not where beauty contests exist. It's this kind of thought experiment scenario where everything is equal number of participants in the database, equal number of submissions, but that's not really how they work. I mean, beauty contests are it's a first world kind of phenomenon, more or less. There is no equal participation. So where they exist is unequal by itself. What was the question you asked me? Sorry, I forgot what you had asked.
The question I asked was why, assuming everything that we've talked about so far, you think that a person judging beauty based on the fact that they have their own ideas, their own beliefs as to what they think is attractive and what is not, better than having at least a somewhat impartial, a somewhat objective computer system, right? Why is a person who is more subjective better at judging something like this than, a more impartial, more objective entity?
Well, my answer to that is that beauty is a completely subjective thing. It is a value that does not exist in and of itself. It exists as filtered through the mind of someone who's observing. Excuse me. So, for example, this chick on my shirt, as hot as she is in her cartoon version, if she were in real life and she were out in the woods somewhere by herself, I always use these out in the woods alone scenarios in these debates. If she were out in the woods by herself, would she be beautiful? It doesn't exist just as a value that's isolated. If there were another person there, they could say yes or no, she's not beautiful. And if you had a computer there just looking at her, it would not be able to discern whether she was beautiful unless a human had subjectively put their ideas into the computer, into the program. Now, the second part of my answer is that everyone knows within an instant whether they're attracted to someone or not. Man looks at a woman, he either gets that feeling or he doesn't. Woman looks at a man, she either gets that feeling or she doesn't. And while there is variation, overwhelmingly, women tend to think the same men are attractive, and men tend to think the same women are attractive. There's a reason that despite Tess Holliday's attempts to convince the world that obesity and probably needing quadruple bypass surgery at the age of 25 is actually really sexy, no one's buying it. There are no obese women on Sports Illustrated. Who's there? Kate Upton, someone everyone knows is beautiful. You look at her, boom. 99% of humans will agree she's beautiful, men and women. So and again, this is all programmed biologically because it's related to genetics. And ultimately what attraction comes down to for both men and women is what person, if I mated with them, would give me the healthiest, strongest children with the highest chance of survival. That's all attraction really is. And again, because it's something inborn in us, it makes no sense to give something like that to a computer who can't make those kinds of calculations because the computer doesn't know, again, aside from human input, what's beautiful and what isn't.
Yeah, I really don't buy that. I don't buy it at all, actually. To address the whole like beauty is subjective, therefore we should have a subjective judge judging it. I seriously don't understand how that even works, right? Because then you have one person saying that this person should win this beauty contest because I think that she's attractive, regardless of how everybody else feels. I think that she's the most beautiful person, therefore she is the winner. Like that I can't understand how that works. Like I get that beauty is subjective, I'm not going to deny that, but we are talking about a competition here. You cannot judge any competition, or you shouldn't be able to judge any competition based on your own personal beliefs. Okay, like I definitely think you need some form of a criteria, I guess, and it shouldn't be your own personal criteria. And I think the best chance to have the most impartial judge possible is using artificial intelligence. I don't think people are able to fundamentally be that impartial that they can just decide beauty based on a certain set of parameters without their own bias. Like, I think it's totally acceptable for people to be like, yeah, I think she's super attractive. I think he is super hot, in their own, in their own mind. I just don't think that should play a part in judging beauty, especially when, it's an actual competition. But let's look at like beauty contests the way that they are now, right? So currently, because you have people judging them and you have to impress a person, it kind of creates this whole idea that, the best way to be attractive is to be super dolled up, to be super covered in makeup, to have the most fancy this and the most fancy that. Whereas to judge by AI, you actually can't use those mechanisms. Like to use AI, you have to make it more natural. So it kind of doesn't proliferate the idea that the most attractive women are the people with the best makeup, the people with the best hair and the best dresses. And so that's kind of where I want to go with this next, is that I think having AI intelligence kind of just completely destroys that, because I think that that's really harmful to anyone who doesn't actually win because they think that people don't think that they're attractive. Whereas at least with a computer system, it's not like, the idea here is that, a computer doesn't find me attractive. Well, people still do, but the computer doesn't, that's fine. I think it's really harmful when, you have subjective people deciding what they think is attractive, particularly towards the people in the competition. And I also just think that, I just really don't agree that subjective nature of beauty should be implemented into a competition, which, has to be objective to at least a small degree, because otherwise how else do you pick a winner? And I think the most objective entity possible to do this is artificial intelligence.
Well, again, like I've said a few times, you can't program beauty standards aside from human standards. You can't create a machine aside from human input anyway. And as far as what you're saying you don't think they should be judged based on the nicest dress or the best makeup, I'm pretty sure they don't judge them on the nicest dress. I don't watch beauty contests myself. I think it's mostly for like neckbeards who just fap in their basement to women they couldn't date in real life. So I'm not sure what the actual standards are, but I'm pretty sure they have to do with skin tone, which, to be fair, makeup helps with, muscle tone, proportion, like the right amount of fat compared to the right amount of muscle. There are contests for women who are just all on steroids and huge, and I think they're disgusting personally, but I guess some people find aesthetics in that. But if we just have a beauty contest being judged based on a plain picture of the girl not smiling with no makeup and it's only the face, then why would they even bother joining? Like, when you have a panel of people judging you, that gives you motivation. You go to the gym, you tone your butt, you eat right, you exercise, you make sure your hair and skin stay nice. I mean, if it was just take a plain picture of yourself from the neck up, send it to a machine, what would be the women's motivation? Why would they participate in the first place?
I think that's just assuming that, beauty contests with artificial intelligence are just going to stay exactly how they were, like when they were done last year. Like, I definitely don't think that that's actually the case. I think that once we realize the capabilities of AI and what we can and cannot do, like, obviously they will adapt. And, we could potentially see full beauty competitions in the future with, like using AI to judge things like, a woman's or a person's full body. But anyway, to address the whole like people the way that people judge beauty competitions, I think you have this weird idea on what people actually judge. Like, yeah, okay, people do judge the things that you said, but people also judge on the most material things that they see. Like, I don't think it's actually correct to assume that when somebody is judging a beauty contest, they just look at the woman's physical features. Like, obviously, they're going to look at things like makeup and hair and dresses, because, you know, you can have like those kinds of things make people look much more attractive, can make people look much more attractive than they actually are. And so I feel like a lot of the time, if you see a woman or anyone really, you know, that's really nice to look at, and then they're wearing, you know, the most unattractive outfit ever, then that kind of like brings them down a step. But anyway, even assuming that they don't, that's not the case. If they just judge on the things that you propped, why the fuck did they go out and spend so much money on their makeup, on their hair, spend so much time getting ready for a beauty contest, when if it's really only about their physique, why don't they just wear a plain pair of shorts, a plain singlet, nothing too fancy? They don't do anything super fancy with their hair. They don't put, they cake face their makeup. Like, I don't understand how you can say that people just judge on their like physique and their body features and their symmetry and their proportions and things like that, when they literally spend so much time, money, and effort making themselves look good. Why do they do that if they're not getting judged? The answer is because they actually do, funnily enough, get judged on those things, which can be pretty harmful for everyone except the judges themselves. And you can, I think you can definitely program these kinds of things into AI. Maybe not the, you know, the dresses and things, but you can definitely program proportions. You can program symmetry. Like, they've already done it, and so it's capable. It might take a bit of work, but it's definitely capable, and we can probably realistically make it work. Maybe not right now, but in the future, I definitely think that it's a viable option, particularly when taking away from like the subjective people and the fact that people just judge on whatever they see and think is the best thing for them, and just without that objectivity.
Well, you kind of proved my point here, because you're insisting that they get judged on the dress, and then 2 seconds later said, well, you couldn't really program the dress into the machine. And I completely agree. There would be no way to put it in. What would you program it to look for? You couldn't program in color, because that's silly. Couldn't program what type of fabric, because the machine wouldn't be able to tell. You've proven my point that the naked eye can see nuance of clothing and other things in a way that a machine never possibly could. Further, you still haven't really answered my question as to how you would do all this stuff aside from human input. Now, they did already program in proportion and symmetry, and the results made all the social justice warriors angry, which is very easy. They are people who are perpetually furious and impossible to please, and for some reason, that's the way that they live their lives. I'm not sure why you're getting so angry about it. I think the answer to your question, you know, why do they judge on all these things? Why don't they go up in shorts? Is because women like to be pretty, and they like to feel attractive and desired. I mean, I think men do too, on a certain level. But it's part of the show. You know, they usually do like a song and a dance or something. From what I understand, they might do trivia. They ask them a question. I think, don't they usually ask, like, if you could change the world, what would be the big change you make? Of course, no one's listening to the answer, but they want to see if the woman can like answer the question. So I think these beauty contests, it's more than just the objective appearance, right? It's her feminine essence coming through her choice of the hair and the makeup and the clothes, through the song and dance routine she chooses, through the way she composes herself when she answers the questions. And these are all completely subjective things. I mean, these are things you can't put into a machine. Like, what you're saying is basically that beauty, this mystical experience of seeing someone and experiencing attraction and beauty, can be codified and put into numbers in a very cold and sterile way. And as you freely admitted, you can't put a lot of these things into a calculation. So I'm not sure. So let's say they're doing a full body. How would you program into the artificial intelligence what on a full body looks beautiful?
I feel like you'd probably do that the same way that they did it to the face. And don't know exactly how they did it, so I can't answer super specific. But I feel like they managed to make it work with just a face. And so I feel like once they, realize what AI can do, they will probably adapt it to extend from just this to this down as well. And so I don't think that's really super valid. But anyway, so in terms of me proving your point about how like super subjective and like that's so good, what I was getting at was that that's actually bad. The reason why it's bad is because it's that means that to be beautiful you have to have a certain look, I guess. So you have to have a certain dress. You have to have the best dress. You have to have a dress better than everybody else. Your hair has to be better than everybody else. Your everything has to be better than everyone else. Whereas without putting these parameters into an AI system, what you do is you eliminate you kind of take away the premise for people to actually judge on that. And in terms of, you can't put this, super mystic, this super big concept into codified numbers. I definitely agree with that. I don't think that we should use AI to judge beauty in all instances. I think in this particular instance, where it is a competition, we should use AI. Like, I don't think I should be able to walk down the street and be like, hey, that guy is cute, and then look at my phone, and then my phone tell me no, and then all of a sudden I'm just like, oh no, he's not. Like, I think that, outside of competitions, people should be fine to, decide whether or not they find someone attractive. I just think that, in an actual competition where the people who win have to have some form of objectivity judging, the best possible way to do that is to have AI. And because that takes away the whole, the whole song and dance thing, because, sometimes it's based on whoever had the best dance. And like, I regret that that's actually a thing, because it shouldn't be a thing. But sometimes competitions are that tight that it comes down to whoever has the best dress or whoever has the best song and dance. And I don't think that that is a viable option for anyone in that competition. I think it should be based on the actual person's physical body or their physical attractiveness, which, is hard to actually measure just physique and just physical when you've got so many other influences trying to impress another person, right? I don't think that that's valid at all. But seeing as I've only got 10 minutes, have the mic back.
Well, you keep asserting your point, saying, I think it should be AI. I don't think that's valid, but I don't think you've done a very good job proving it. I mean, as I said a couple rounds ago, beauty is not just an objective. It's not just numbers. Beauty is an experience. It's the whole woman of who she is, and the way she smiles, and the way her eyes move, and the way she carries herself, and maybe again her choice of song and dance. So, like, when I look at these beauty contest winners that the AI project did, I don't know if those women are beautiful, because they're just sitting there, stone faced, no makeup. I have no idea if I would pass them on the street and she would make me go, ooh, now she looks interesting, or she's really cute, or she's really pretty. I have no idea, because again, beauty is a subjective, personal, and human experience that you can't codify. And I mean, if you tried to put all these different factors into a machine, the dress and the color and the fabric and the skin tone and the body fat and the face, I mean, now you've taken all the joy out of it. You've taken all the fun out of, for the women I'm talking about here, out of like staying in shape and eating healthy and practicing the song and the dance. I don't think any of them would participate, because why would any woman care if some machine ranks her attractive if actual human men and women don't? So I think that your suggestion is, besides being unproven by you, in my opinion, I think it's very cold and sterile and takes the human element out of it. That being said, I don't have much else to say on the topic. Thank you again for inviting me. I'm glad we were able to have a respectful debate, and I look forward to seeing the results. So have a good night, and I'll see you later.